Long before I came into the picture, before the little house, the empty pot, and my dad's quiet tears, he was just a boy like any other, bursting with dreams and that kind of hope that can thrive even in tough times. It's wild to think about, right? My dad, Ibuka, grew up in a small village filled with red dust and the smell of firewood. He often shared stories from those days that painted a vivid picture in my mind. His father, Papa Matthew, a hard-working farmer who toiled from dawn till the moon lit up the sky, and his mother, who trekked miles each morning with baskets of veggies on her head to sell at the market. Can you imagine that? Just picture it. The sun rising over the fields, the air thick with the earthy scent of soil, and the sounds of the village waking up. He and his younger brother, Chibyuk, were all their parents had in a world that didn't give much and expected even more. Life wasn't a walk in the park. Dinner was often just yam without oil or thin maize porridge that barely filled their bellies. You know how it is. When you're hungry, you'll eat anything. But for them, it was about survival, not just filling up. When it was time to pay for school, their mom would sell part of her harvest, or sometimes even her wrapper, just to keep them in class. Talk about sacrifice, right? But still, both boys dreamed big. Leaving the village, chasing city lights, and finding something beyond the slow pace of village life. They had this fire in their hearts, this longing for something more, something better. By the time my dad turned 16, the city was this shiny promise every young man wanted to chase. He said that's where the roads were smooth, the lights never dimmed, and money flowed like the wind. But dreams, just like transport fare, always come with a price. It's like a ticket to a concert. Exciting, but you gotta pay to get in. Their dad had saved for years, tucking away his little hope in a cloth under his pillow. When he finally counted it, it was only enough to send one son. Can you feel the tension in that moment? The weight of a decision that could change everything? One evening, under the mango tree, Papa Matthew called his boys. The crickets were chirping, and the air was filled with the scent of dry earth. "I can only send one," he said softly. "The money won't stretch for both of you." My dad told me he looked at Chibyuk then. His younger brother was sharp, always dreaming about machines and tall buildings and the life he'd build one day. You know the type, full of ideas and ambition. My dad, steady and strong, knew how to work the land and fix things, but his dreams were simpler. He was practical, the kind of guy who would make sure everything was taken care of, even if it meant putting his own dreams on hold. That night, neither boy could sleep. My dad lay awake, listening to Chibyuk's breathing beside him, torn between wanting to go and wanting to stay. Part of him wanted to chase his dreams, but a deeper part knew Chibyuk's chances were brighter. It's that classic sibling bond, right? You want the best for each other, even if it means making tough choices. Before dawn, he found his dad sharpening his hoe behind the house. "Papa," he said, "let Chibyuk go." His dad looked up, surprised. "You're sure?" My dad nodded. "He'll do well there. I'll stay and help you with the farm." Papa Matthew stared at him for a long moment. The morning light, my dad said, was soft and golden that day. "Ibuka," he asked, "you mean you don't want to go to the city?" "I want to," my dad replied. "But Chibyuk will make more of it. Someone has to stay. Someone has to look after you and Mama." When he shared this part, his eyes always softened. "Your grandfather didn't say anything at first," he said, but I could see his shoulders shake a little. Then the old man called, voice trembling, "Chibyuk, come out here, my son." Chibyuk ran out, still wiping sleep from his eyes. "Yes, Papa, your brother has spoken," their father said. "He says you should go to the city. He'll stay here with me." My dad said Chibyuk just stood there, silent, before breaking into a wide, astonished smile. He turned to Ibuka. "Really?" "Yes," my dad told him. "Someone has to make it out there. You're the one who can." Chibyuk threw his arms around him, laughing and crying at the same time. "Thank you, Ibuka. I'll make you proud. I promise." My dad just smiled and patted his back, even though his chest ached. "I know you will," he whispered. Their father watched them, tears glistening in his eyes. "My sons," he said, "if you stand by each other like this, the world can never truly make you poor." That evening, their mom prepared a small feast, boiled yam with palm oil and a bit of smoked fish, more than they'd had in weeks. They sat together under lantern light, with crickets singing outside, their laughter soft and full. It was a moment of joy, but also of bittersweet farewell. But when night fell and everyone else was asleep, my dad stayed awake, listening to the familiar sounds of the village, frogs croaking, the river murmuring beyond the trees. He looked at the roof above him and whispered, "Go well, my brother. Don't forget us." He had no idea then that his choice, his quiet sacrifice under that rising sun, would stick with him for life. And one day, years later, he'd find himself where his father once stood, watching someone he loved, me, drive away toward a future brighter than his own. My dad once told me about the morning Chibyuk left for the city, the morning that changed everything. The village was still half asleep, he said. Mist hung over the fields like a veil, and the roosters had just started crowing. His dad had borrowed a neighbor's old bicycle to carry Chibyuk's small bag to the main road, where the city bus would stop. Inside the house, my grandmother carefully tied Chibyuk's clothes into a bundle. 2 shirts, 1 pair of trousers, and the best sandals they had. She tucked in a small Bible and a folded note of prayer, her hands trembling a bit as she worked. When she finished, she placed the bundle in Chibyuk's hands and kissed his forehead. "Go well, my son," she told him, her voice shaky. "Don't forget where you came from." Outside, my dad was waiting. He'd woken before dawn, drawn water, and swept the compound, anything to keep himself busy. But when he saw his younger brother ready to leave, he told me. The weight of it hit him all at once. Chibyuk walked up to him slowly. "Brother," he said softly, "I'll never forget what you did for me. You gave me this chance." My dad smiled a little. "Just make the most of it," he said. Chibyuk nodded. Then, leaning closer, he whispered, "If I find work and things go well, I'll come back for you. I'll take you to the city. We'll both make it." My dad said he looked at him in surprise. "You mean that?" "I swear it," Chibyuk told him, resting a hand on his shoulder. "We started together, we'll finish together." The bus arrived soon after, an old, rattling vehicle with peeling paint and passengers hanging out the windows. The driver shouted for everyone to hurry. Chibyuk hugged his parents tightly, then turned to my dad. "Take care of them for me," he said. "I will," my dad replied. "Go and make us proud." As the bus pulled away, my dad felt a mix of pride and sadness. He watched as Chibyuk waved, his figure getting smaller and smaller until he was just a dot on the horizon. That was the moment everything shifted. The dreams they had shared, the hopes for a better life, all rested on Chibyuk's shoulders now. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Life went on in the village, but it felt different. My dad took on more responsibilities, working the fields and helping his parents as best he could. He missed Chibyuk terribly, but held on to the promise his brother made. Chibyuk's journey was filled with challenges. The city was a whirlwind of noise and lights, a stark contrast to the quiet of their village. But he was determined. He found odd jobs, sometimes working late into the night, fueled by the dreams they had shared. Each paycheck was a step closer to stability, a chance to lift their family out of the struggle. Meanwhile, my dad continued to work the land, his heart heavy but hopeful. He often thought of the moments they shared under the mango tree, the laughter, the dreams, and the bond that held them together. He believed in Chibyuk, believed he would find a way to make it. As time passed, letters began to arrive. Chibyuk wrote about his experiences, the people he met, and the struggles he faced. My dad cherished each word, feeling a connection to his brother even. Chibyuk climbed aboard the bus, and with a loud cough and a cloud of dust, he was off into the unknown. Can you imagine that moment? The excitement, the nervousness, the thrill of leaving everything behind for something bigger? At first, the letters poured in like a river. My dad said Chibyuk wrote about the city, its bright lights, busy streets, tall buildings, and constant noise. It was a whole new world for him. He described how strange it felt to sleep under electric bulbs instead of the warm glow of lanterns. The food was pricey, but work was plentiful. It was a trade-off, right? Every letter wrapped up the same way. "Telebuka, I haven't forgotten my promise." Those words became a lifeline for my dad. On those scorching days when the sun beat down mercilessly and his hands blistered from working the fields, he whispered those words to himself. It was like a mantra, a reminder that hope was still alive. He woke up early, tended the crops, fixed fences, fetched water, never complaining, even when hunger gnawed at him. Each day, he'd gaze down the road where the bus had vanished, half hoping to see Chibyuk returning, smiling, and calling out, "Come on, Ibuka, it's time." It was a dream that kept him going, you know? Months turned into years, and life in the village was slow, steady, and tough. The letters, once bursting with excitement and hope, started to dwindle. Chibyuk wrote about landing a job at a mechanic's shop, learning the ropes, and how the city lights were brighter than the moon. Can you picture that? A young man, surrounded by the hustle and bustle of city life, living out his dreams. But every letter still ended the same. Tell Ibuka I'll come for him soon. Tell Papa and Mama I'm doing well. When a letter arrived, my dad would rush home from the fields, hands still dusty, just to hear my grandfather read it by the fire. My grandmother would smile through her tears, whispering, "God has remembered us." Those moments felt like magic, like a glimpse of hope shining through the hardships. But soon, the letters came less frequently. Then they got shorter. Just a few lines. "I'm fine. Work is going well. Greet everyone." Then silence. At first, they thought the post was just delayed. But weeks turned into months, and the silence became heavy. You could feel it in the air, a weight that settled over the village like a thick fog. My dad kept working, but he wasn't the same. Every time a bicycle bell rang or a bus horn blared in the distance, he'd stop, squinting down the road, hoping it was Chibyuk coming back. But it never was. That hope turned into a dull ache in his chest, a reminder of the brother he missed more than anything. Then, during one rainy season, my grandmother fell ill. It started with a cough that wouldn't go away, then a fever, and finally, weakness. She became too tired to get out of bed. They tried herbs, prayers, everything they could afford. My dad sat by her side every night, wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. "You'll be fine, Mama," he whispered. "Chibyuk will send for a doctor when he hears." He believed it with all his heart, clinging to the idea that his brother would come through for them. But Chibyuk didn't hear. They sent word to the city through a relative who traded there, but no reply came. No letter, no message. Days blurred together with worry and exhaustion. It was like waiting for a storm to pass, but the clouds just kept rolling in. Then, one afternoon, an old family friend named Uncle Moses came to visit. He often traveled between the city and nearby towns, so when my grandfather saw him, he quickly asked, "Moses, have you seen my son Chibyuk?" The old man nodded, taking a slow sip of water. "Ah, yes," he said. "I saw him not long ago. He's doing well, working in a big shop, wearing nice clothes, even riding a motorcycle." They fell silent for a moment, processing the news. Then my grandmother asked quietly, "He's doing well? Then why hasn't he written? Why hasn't he come home?" You could feel the worry in her voice, the fear that maybe Chibyuk had forgotten them. Moses sighed. "City life changes people. Maybe he's busy. Maybe he thinks you're managing well. You know how it is." Those words stung. It was like a knife twisting in my dad's heart. He didn't want to believe that Chibyuk had forgotten them. He couldn't. He still heard his brother's voice in his mind. "We started together, we'll finish together." But when he looked at his mother, frail and coughing in the corner, a heavy weight settled in his chest, a burden he would carry for years. It was a painful realization that life had moved on for Chibyuk, but for them, time seemed to stand still. That night, as rain softly fell on the roof, my dad lay awake, listening to my grandfather's quiet sobs through the wall. He turned to the empty space beside him and whispered into the dark, "You haven't forgotten us, have you, Chibyuk?" The wind answered with silence. Only the rain and the faint crackle of the dying fire kept him company. My dad once told me that the sickness clung to my grandmother like a shadow at dusk, quiet, stubborn, and impossible to shake. At first, everyone thought it was just a fever, something the rains would wash away. But days turned into weeks, and she grew thinner and weaker. She could hardly eat or speak. Often, she lay still, her eyes fixed on the thatched roof, as if she were already seeing somewhere beyond it. My dad did everything he could. He gathered herbs from the forest, boiled bitter leaves that the village elders said could heal. He begged the local healer to come and pray over her. At night, when everyone else was asleep, he sat beside her bed, fanning her gently, whispering, "Please, Mama, don't leave me. Chibyuk will come soon. He'll bring medicine from the city. Just hold on." But Chibyuk didn't come. They sent message after message through traders and travelers heading to the city, men who promised to look for him, to tell him his mother was sick and needed him. None brought a reply. Each new silence pressed heavier on the house, like a dark cloud that wouldn't lift. One evening, as the sky turned orange with the setting sun, My grandmother called him close. Her hands trembled as she reached for his. Ibuka, she whispered, her voice as thin as the wind. You've been strong for all of us. Promise me you'll look after your father. Tears filled his eyes. Don't talk like that, Mama. You'll get better. I'll go to the next town tomorrow for medicine. He was desperate, clinging to hope even as he felt it slipping away. But she only smiled, that soft, knowing smile of someone who has already made peace with goodbye. My son, she said, if I go, don't hold anger in your heart. Not for your brother, not for anyone. Life is bigger than our pain. Let love stay. Those words echoed in my dad's mind, a gentle reminder that love should always prevail over anger. That night, before dawn, she slipped quietly into eternity, her breath fading into the cool morning air. My dad woke to my grandfather's broken voice calling her name. The little house filled with grief, with silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Word spread quickly through the village. Neighbors came with baskets of food, mats, and cloth, their faces heavy with sorrow. Together, they wrapped her in white and laid her to rest beneath the old mango tree behind the house, the one where she used to sit every evening, watching her sons play. It was a bittersweet moment, a celebration of her life mixed with the pain of her absence. Through it all, my dad kept glancing at the road, hoping, praying that Chibyuk would show up, that somehow his brother had heard and was on his way home. But Chibyuk never came. Even after more messages were sent, even after the burial was over and the mourners had left, there was no word, not a letter, not a visit, not a whisper from the city. My grandfather, once strong as iron, began to fade. He sat for hours outside the house, staring into the distance, his hands still but restless. The weight of loss bent his back and dimmed his eyes. It was heartbreaking to see a once vibrant man reduced to a shell of himself, lost in his memories. My dad did everything he could to keep things together. He farmed, cooked, fetched water, and took care of his father's every need. But he told me there were nights when his hope nearly broke under the quiet ache of missing too much. Sometimes, he said, he would sit by the fire, turning over the letters Chibyuk had once sent, now tattered and faded. The ink had grown pale with time, but one line still stood out. Tell Ibuka I'll come for him soon. He would trace those words with his finger, whispering, You promised. But the night only answered with the sound of crickets and the low hum of the dying fire. It was a haunting reminder of promises made and promises broken. After his mother's burial, the house felt empty. One morning, as the sun began to peek over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the fields, my father found his dad sitting outside on that old, familiar stool of his. He was just staring out at the land, lost in thought. The hoe he usually used to tend to the soil lay there, untouched, as if time had stopped for a moment. Papa, my father said gently, trying to coax him inside. It's chilly out here. But his father didn't respond. As my dad stepped closer, he noticed a serene peace on his father's face. A peace that felt too deep, too final. His chest wasn't rising anymore. His body was still, like the calm before a storm. Panic surged through him, and he dropped to his knees, shaking his father softly. Papa, Papa, he cried out, but there was no answer. Burying his face in his father's lap, he wept like a little kid, the kind of tears that come from a place of pure heartbreak. You could have waited, he whispered through his tears. You could have waited for Chibyuk to come. But Chibyuk never showed up. My father laid his dad to rest next to his mother under the mango tree, the same spot where their laughter used to echo, where they'd shared so many joyful moments. The elders from the village came to lend a hand, their faces somber, but their hearts full of support. Neighbors brought food, offering quiet company, leaving one by one as the sun dipped low in the sky, painting everything in shades of orange and purple. When the last mourner left, my father was all alone. The wind rustled through the branches, scattering dry leaves over the fresh earth, a gentle reminder of the cycle of life. He knelt there, hands pressed to the soil, feeling the weight of everything he'd lost, a mother's warmth, a father's strength, a brother's promise that had vanished like smoke. That night, sitting by the dying fire, the house felt way too big for just one heart. Shadows danced on the walls like ghosts from the past, memories swirling around him. Now it's just me, he whispered, the words heavy with loneliness. In that moment, he truly understood what loneliness meant. It wasn't just the absence of people, It was the echo of laughter that had once filled the space, the warmth of shared meals, and the comfort of knowing someone was always there. Yet, even through the grief, something quiet and strong began to blossom, the kind of strength that comes from surviving sorrow. He told himself life had to keep moving, somehow. He would keep working, keep living, keep hoping, because that's what his parents would have wanted. And even though the road ahead was uncertain, he carried their memory like a little lamp in the dark, a flickering light that would eventually guide him to a new beginning. My father often said that after his own father passed, time seemed to slow down. The seasons slipped by quietly, he told me, days blending into one another like rain soaking into the soil. For a long time, he only spoke to the earth he tilled and the sky he prayed to. Each morning, he woke before dawn, worked the fields alone, and returned home only when the sun sank behind the trees. The little house he lived in felt heavy with memories of those who were gone, each corner holding a story, a moment frozen in time. Sometimes, when the wind blew in from the city road, he'd stop his work and gaze toward the horizon, that same dusty path his brother had taken years before. He no longer expected Chibyuk to come back. The waiting had ended long ago, replaced by a quieter feeling, acceptance. He once told me, "There came a time when I finally realized your uncle wasn't coming back." The pain of that truth had burned him once, but over the years, it dulled like an old scar. He learned to live with it, not in bitterness, but in peace. Around that time, he said, he met my mother, Mary. She came from a nearby village, a kind woman who often fetched water from the stream near his farm. The first time they met, she was struggling up the narrow path with a heavy pot on her head, her brow furrowed in concentration. My father, seeing her struggle, offered to help, but she smiled shyly and shook her head. "I can manage," she said, her voice soft yet determined. Still, he walked beside her, chatting softly and carefully. It had been ages since he'd spoken gently to anyone, and it felt good to share words again, to connect over the simple act of helping. Over the following weeks, they often met by the stream or at the market, their paths crossing in the most delightful ways. Slowly, laughter began to return to his life. A small, fragile thing at first, but real. My mother had known hardship too. She lost her parents when she was young and lived with an aunt who barely had enough for herself. Maybe that's why she and my father understood each other so well. Both carried quiet pain, but in each other's company, they found comfort. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in hues of gold and pink, my father opened up to her about his parents, his brother, and the silence that followed. My mother listened intently, her eyes filled with compassion. When he finished, she touched his hand and said, "Sometimes, the people we love aren't as strong as we hoped. But we can still live, Ibuka. We can still build something good." Her words, he said, changed everything. They were like a balm for his aching heart, a reminder that life could still hold joy, even after loss. He still thought of Chibyuk sometimes, wondering if his brother thought of him too. But the bitterness faded. Instead of anger, there was calm. He learned that life doesn't wait for those who leave. It keeps moving for those who stay. Years later, when I was born, he told me he held me in his arms one night, cradling me close to his chest, and whispered, "I don't need the city anymore. My world is right here." My mother smiled from her spot by the fire, her eyes twinkling with warmth and love. "You've done well, Ibuka," she said, pride evident in her voice. And as I reached for his beard, my tiny fingers grasping at the soft strands, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: peace. The pain of the past still lived somewhere deep inside him, but it no longer ruled his heart. He had found love again, built a home again, and that was enough. He no longer waited for Chibyuk's return. The road to the city could keep its secrets. He used to tell me, "Grace, the people who stay, not the ones who leave, are the true blessings of a man's life." My parents' wedding was simple but perfect. The whole village gathered beneath the wide branches of the old mango tree, the same tree that had watched him grow from a barefoot boy into a man who had buried his parents and was now ready to start anew. The air smelled of roasted yam and laughter, a sweet reminder of community and connection. There were no loudspeakers, no fancy clothes, just drums, clapping, and pure joy. My mother wore a white dress her aunt had sewn by hand, the fabric flowing gently around her as she moved. My father wore his best shirt, freshly washed and pressed, even if it had long since faded. When the elder pronounced them husband and wife, he felt a peace he couldn't quite put into words. It was as if all the struggles, all the heartache, had led to this moment. He looked into her eyes, shining with quiet happiness, and whispered, "We'll build something good together." She smiled and nodded, a shared promise hanging in the air between them. That night, after the guests had left and the fire had dimmed, they sat outside their small house beneath the stars, the sky a blanket of twinkling lights. "Mary," my father said, "we may not have much, but we have strength. If we work hard, we'll make this place better. One day, we'll have enough to feed others, not just ourselves." And my mother, in her gentle way, replied, "I believe you, Ibuka. God gives more to hands that don't stop working." From that day on, their lives moved to a shared rhythm, one of labor and love. At dawn, my father would rise before the sun, hoe on his shoulder, and head to the farm. The air was crisp, filled with the promise of a new day. My mother would pack him a small meal, roasted maize or boiled yam wrapped in leaves, and later in the day, she'd join him to plant, weed, or gather firewood, their laughter mingling with the sounds of nature. When harvest time came, they stored their grains in woven baskets, selling part of it at the village market. My mother had a knack for trade. She always knew how to stretch little into plenty. With the coins they earned, they began to dream bigger, their hopes rising like the sun each morning. My father cleared a new plot near the stream, promising it would one day become a bigger farm. My mother started raising chickens behind the house, saying, "If we have eggs, we'll never go hungry." In the evenings, they sat outside together, dreaming about their future. "I want us to have a strong home," my father would say, When my parents first tied the knot, their life in our little village was pretty straightforward, woven together with threads of hard work, prayer, and a comforting routine. It had a certain charm, you know? But even in their cozy little world, there was this lingering shadow, the absence of my father's brother, Chibyuk. Years before, Chibyuk had set off for the city, filled with big dreams and promises of returning, but then he just vanished into silence. My dad hardly ever brought him up, but as I grew up, I realized Chibyuk was a name that carried both love and a deep, quiet ache. It was like a ghost haunting our family, a reminder of what could have been. Life was tough for my parents back then. I can still picture my father, working tirelessly, often borrowing small amounts from neighbors, just to keep food on the table and seeds for the farm. I can see him now, sitting at their wooden table every night, candlelight flickering, counting coins and debts, his face a mask of concentration. It was a struggle, but he was determined to make it work. My mother, Mary, was his rock. She never complained about their hardships. Instead, she showed her love in the little things, a warm bowl of soup waiting for him, a gentle touch on his shoulder, or a smile that said he wasn't alone in this fight. Her quiet strength was like a warm blanket on a cold night, wrapping around my father's worries, making them a bit more bearable. But still, the weight of debt and the ghost of Chibyuk's disappearance hung over them like a dark cloud. It was always there, a reminder of lost dreams and unfulfilled promises. Then one morning, everything shifted. My mother approached my father, her smile trembling as she shared the news. She was pregnant with me. In that moment, joy and fear collided like thunder and lightning. My father later confessed that his first feeling was panic. He was already struggling. How could he possibly provide for a child? But then he looked into my mother's eyes, filled with trust and love, and something shifted in his heart. A new resolve took root. If life was giving him a new reason to fight, then he would fight harder than he ever had before. He began planning with this quiet, fierce determination. He started waking before dawn to tend a small garden, growing vegetables to save money at the market. Can you imagine him, out there in the early morning light, hands in the soil, dreaming of a better future for his family? He patched their leaking roof, mended old tools, and even started carving small wooden toys for the baby he hadn't even met yet. At night, he kept a little notebook, meticulously tracking every coin borrowed and repaid. Slowly, the numbers started to balance. My mother matched his every effort. She sewed tiny clothes from old fabrics, preserved fruits for the months ahead, and hummed soft tunes as she worked. They moved together, a team preparing for a child they weren't ready for but already loved beyond measure. My father still had his moments of doubt. My mother told me he would sometimes stare into the empty corners of their home and whisper, "Will it be enough?" Those words hung in the air, heavy with uncertainty. But as her belly grew, so did his courage. The thought of me, this small, fragile promise of a future, gave him a strength he never knew he possessed. By the time I was born, he had transformed. No longer was he just a man burdened by loss and debt. He had become a father. The night I arrived was long and quiet, filled only with my mother's pained cries and my father's whispered prayers. He never left her side, holding her hand through it all. And when I finally arrived with the dawn, crying loud and strong, my father said it was like hearing the sound of hope itself. Later that morning, he carried me outside into the fresh air. As the village began to stir, a strange sound broke the morning calm, the hum of an engine. A large car, a rare sight, was making its way down the dusty road. A man in fine clothes stepped out, his face full and his smile confident. It was Chibyuk. My father froze, then rushed forward to embrace the brother he thought he'd lost forever. "Chibyuk," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Mama and Papa, they're gone." Chibyuk's smile vanished. My father led him to their graves, and Chibyuk knelt, his body shaking with sobs for the years and the family he had missed. For my father, holding me in his arms, it felt like a broken circle finally finding its way back together. Chibyuk's return filled our small house with a new kind of energy. It was louder, brighter, and full of stories from the city. But for my father, it was also heavier. He was a new parent, exhausted from sleepless nights and long days on the farm. The debts were still there, and I, the baby, cried endlessly. One evening, when the house was finally quiet, my father found the courage to speak. "It's been hard, Chibyuk," he began. "With the baby, I need your help." Chibyuk's response was polite but distant. "How's the farm?" he asked, changing the subject. My father tried again, his voice pleading. "You promised to take me to the city. You said we'd build something together. I waited for you." A flicker of guilt crossed Chibyuk's eyes, but it was gone in an instant. "Ah, Ibuka," he said with a dismissive wave. "City life is not for you. You wouldn't understand." That was the moment my father understood. The city hadn't just made his brother rich, it had hollowed him out. The promises were empty. He still loved Chibyuk, but as he watched his brother talk of profits while my mother hummed me to sleep, my father made a silent vow. His family's future would not depend on a broken promise. It would be built by his own two hands. Uncle Chibyuk stayed for a while, and at first, his generosity seemed like a blessing. He brought sacks of rice, sugar, and even tins of milk, luxuries we could only dream of. But he never once offered my father any actual money. He never asked about the debts or the struggles. It was charity without connection, gifts without understanding. My mother would thank him, her voice polite, but I remember seeing her afterward, sitting silently, a worried line creasing her brow. His generosity felt like a wall, not a bridge. Then came the day that changed everything. My father had been planning to buy a small plot of land next to our farm. It was a chance to expand, to finally get ahead. He had saved a little, but he was still short. He decided to ask Chibyuk for a loan, not a gift. He explained his plan, how the land would secure our future. Chibyuk listened, then smiled that same distant smile. "A loan," he said. "Ibuka, you are a farmer. What do you know of business? This is a bad investment." The words struck my father harder than a physical blow. It wasn't just a refusal, it was a dismissal of his dreams, his hard work, his entire life. The next morning, Chibyuk announced he was leaving. He packed his fine clothes, gave me a brief pat on the head, and drove away, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. In that quiet emptiness, something in my father hardened into steel. The hurt and disappointment forged a new resolve. He looked at my mother, at me, at the small home he had fought so hard to protect. And he knew. He was on his own. From that moment on, every swing of his hoe, every step he took towards the farm, every single coin he saved was for us. The city, his brother, the broken promises, they became a closed chapter. His world was now defined by what was real. My mother, our home, and the future growing quietly under the same mango tree where it had all begun. He was no longer waiting for help. He had become the help. As the days turned into months, my father's determination transformed our lives. The garden he tended flourished, providing us with fresh vegetables that we could sell at the market. He became known as the man who could coax life from the soil, a quiet hero in our village. His reputation grew, and so did our little family's standing in the community. Neighbors began to notice the change in our lives. They would stop by to chat, often bringing a little something to share, a basket of fruits or a jar of honey. My mother's warm smile and my father's hard-working spirit drew people in, creating a bond that felt like family. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were thriving together, and it felt incredible. But my father never lost sight of the struggles that had shaped him. He often shared stories of his early days, reminding me of the importance of hard work and resilience. He wanted me to understand that life wasn't just about the good times. It was about facing challenges head-on and coming out stronger on the other side. As I grew older, I began to help my father in the fields. There was something magical about working alongside him, feeling the sun on my back and the earth beneath my feet. He taught me how to plant seeds, how to nurture them, and how to appreciate the fruits of our labor. Every harvest was a celebration, a reminder of our hard work paying off. Through it all, my mother remained the heart of our home. Her laughter filled the air, and one evening, I caught a conversation between Uncle Chibyuk and my father that really stuck with me. Picture this. Uncle Chibyuk was lounging on the veranda, totally at ease, chatting away with the kind of confidence that only comes from someone who's traveled and seen a lot of life. "Oh, by the way," he said casually, "I have a son now, and my wife's expecting another." He grinned proudly as he spoke, like he was sharing the best news in the world. My father nodded, forcing a small smile, but I noticed a shift in his eyes, a quiet ache, like something inside him had just cracked open. Chibyuk didn't even ask about me, the new baby in the house, or mention the struggles my parents were facing. It felt like a slap in the face, like he was so caught up in his own world that he forgot we existed. In the days that followed, Uncle Chibyuk became a local favorite. Everyone was talking about him, saying how generous he was, buying drinks at the bar, handing out cash to girls, treating folks at restaurants, and laughing like he'd never faced a hard day in his life. My father heard all this from neighbors who didn't realize how much it stung. "Your brother's a good man," they'd say. "He's sharing his wealth." But at home, we knew the truth. For all his spending, Chibyuk never shared with his own family. It was hard to watch. I could see the disappointment in my father's eyes every time someone praised Chibyuk. It felt like a reminder of everything we were missing out on. At night, I remember my father sitting by the fire, holding me close as I drifted off to sleep. His face looked calm, but I could feel the storm brewing inside him. He was the kind of man who wore his heart on his sleeve, and even as a little kid, I could sense his struggles. Later, when I was older, my mother told me he made a vow during those nights, that no matter what, he would raise his family with his own hands. He wouldn't beg again, not even from his brother. Then one morning, everything changed again. My father woke up to find Uncle Chibyuk packing his things. The car was outside, shiny and gleaming in the sunlight, already loaded with boxes. My father tried to hide the weight in his voice as he approached him. "Chibyuk," he said softly, "you've been here for weeks, but you haven't given me any money." "What?" Chibyuk looked at him like he'd asked something totally strange. "Ibyuka," he said, almost laughing. "I've spent a lot since I got back. Food, drinks, everything. I don't have much left. I need to get back to the city and hustle. You know how it is." I often picture my father in that moment, standing in the yard, holding me on his back, the morning sun warming his face while his brother's words chilled him to the bone. He had been the one who urged their father to send Chibyuk to the city, thinking it was the best shot for their family. And now, that same brother stood before him, changed, distant, untouched by their struggles. "I can't believe this," my father whispered, his voice breaking under the weight of disappointment. "You promised. We trusted you." But Chibyuk just shrugged, his face unmoved. "Things are different now, Ibyuka. You'll manage. I have to go." And with that, he got into the car and drove away, leaving behind nothing but the sound of his engine and a trail of dust. My father stood there for a long time, staring after him, the air thick with silence. My mother came to the doorway, holding her shawl close. "He's gone," she said quietly. My father nodded once. Then he turned toward the house, toward the life that still needed him. That day marked a turning point in my father's life. The hurt ran deep, but underneath it, something solid began to grow, resolve. He had lost faith in promises, but he found new faith in himself. It was like a fire igniting within him, and I could sense that things were about to change. The next morning, he began again. He looked at our small home and the patch of land behind it and started planning. He repaired the roof where it leaked. He tilled the soil with care, planting vegetables that would grow quickly. He spent every coin wisely and wasted nothing. When the sun grew hot, he kept working. When the rains came, he kept working still. It was inspiring to watch, honestly. He started picking up small jobs, fixing tools for neighbors, helping to build fences, and carrying goods to the market. My mom jumped in too, sewing clothes, mending shoes, and trading whatever she could spare. Together, they found their groove, one of grit and determination, not just comfort. They were like a well-oiled machine, working side by side to make ends meet. Word spread about my dad. People who once felt sorry for him began to see him differently. That Ebuka, they'd say, he works harder than anyone. Some even offered him small loans or materials to help grow the farm. Little by little, our home transformed. A repaired roof here, a fuller storehouse there. What once felt fragile now seemed like a solid home built to last. At night, my dad would sit by the fire, his hands rough and tired, but his face calm. I was just a baby then, but my mom told me he often whispered to the flames, "It's all right. We'll be fine. We'll make it." And he was right. Uncle Chibyuk's departure hit him hard, but it also sparked something strong, a resilience that only loss can teach. He stopped waiting for help from the city or anyone else. He realized that his own hands and heart were enough. It was a lesson that would stick with me for life. Over time, that belief became the bedrock of our lives, a quiet lesson my dad left me with long after I grew old enough to understand. Even when those you love walk away, you can rise. The work done in silence, with faith and love, is stronger than all the promises ever made and broken. Sometimes, when someone drives away and leaves you in the dust, that's not the end of your story. It's just the beginning. Years rolled on, and I started to grow, bright, curious, and full of questions, or so my parents said. My earliest memories are of our little home surrounded by fields and the smell of earth after rain. My dad, Ibuka, was always busy, tilling the land, fixing things, or coming home late, his clothes heavy with dust and sweat. My mom, Mary, was gentle and warm, though I remember her moving slower as her belly grew rounder with the baby who would soon become my brother. When I was old enough to start school, excitement filled our home, but beneath it, I could sense my father's worry. I didn't understand it then, but I know now that every coin mattered. The small uniform, the few books, and the school fees were like mountains to him. He never said it aloud, but I could see it in the way he counted money under the dim lantern light, his brow furrowed and lips pressed tight. Still, he never let me see his fear. Every morning, he'd hand me a small lunch and say, "Study hard, my daughter. You'll go far." I would smile and run off, unaware that he sometimes skipped his own meals so that I could eat. There were nights when I'd finish the last bite of rice, and he'd pat my head, saying he wasn't hungry. I used to believe him. Now, I understand that those were the quiet sacrifices love demanded of him. My mother saw it too. She often watched him with tears in her eyes as he worked late into the night, patching the roof or planning the next planting season. "You should rest," she'd say. But he only smiled. His love was heavy and silent, something you didn't need to hear to feel. Even when times were tough and our cupboards were almost bare, my father never gave up. His determination set the tone for our days. He often said, "Hard times pass, but what we build from them lasts." I didn't really get it back then, but those words took root in my heart. By the time I turned 5, I was full of questions and energy, chasing butterflies and running barefoot along the village paths. My little brother was just a baby, and my father carried the weight of our futures on his shoulders. No matter how hard he worked, it never felt like enough, but he kept pushing forward. Then one afternoon, everything changed. Word spread quickly that Uncle Chibyuk was coming back. I didn't remember much about him, just bits and pieces from whispered stories between my parents. When he finally arrived, his car gleamed like something out of a dream. He looked confident, well-fed, and somehow distant, like he didn't belong to the same soil as us anymore. My father stood on the doorstep, a mix of pride and pain in his eyes. They talked for a long time. I remember sitting nearby, playing with a stick in the dirt while the men spoke in hushed tones. Later, I found out what my father had asked. He told Chibyuk he didn't want money. He just wanted me to have a chance. "Take her with you," he said. Let her study in the city. Give her what I can't. For a while, Uncle Chibyuk didn't say anything. While I was studying in the city, he was back home, working hard to build our life, helping other farmers, fixing tools, and traveling to nearby markets for just a few coins. My mom always told me how he never stopped dreaming, whispering to her late at night, "It's only for now. Things will get better." Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still picture him sitting outside under the moonlight, hands folded, gazing up at the stars. I like to think he was praying for me, for strength, safety, and a future he might never see. He didn't say much, but his love was like the soil he worked, quiet, patient, and full of life. Even when times were tough, he held on to the hope that one day his kids would rise above the struggles he faced. Looking back now, I see what my father taught me, not through grand speeches, but through every sacrifice, every hungry night, and every weary smile. He showed me that love isn't loud or flashy. It's steady, like hands planting seeds, knowing they might never sit in the shade of the tree that grows from them. Though his life was tough, it was also filled with grace. Because of him, I learned that love sometimes means letting go, trusting that the ones you release will come back stronger, carrying the hope you planted in them long ago. When Uncle Chibyuk first brought me to the city, I thought I was the luckiest girl alive. Everything felt magical, the tall buildings sparkling at night, the endless noise of cars, the lights that never seemed to sleep. I sat in the back seat, staring out the window in awe, clutching the doll Mama had sewn for me. Uncle Chibyuk smiled and said, "You'll go to a good school, Amara. You'll have a better life." My little heart believed every word. But the city wasn't the dream I had in mind. From day one, Auntie Clara's eyes were cold. She didn't want me there. I could feel it in her sighs and the way she grumbled about extra mouths to feed. Her son, Nathan, was 7 and already treated me like a servant, not a cousin. I waited for the next day, thinking I would start school soon. Instead, I was handed a broom. "Sweep the compound," Auntie Clara said. "Then fetch water. Be quick." From that morning on, my life changed. Every day, before the sun rose, I swept, washed dishes, fetched water, bathed Nathan, and helped prepare breakfast. Only after everyone had eaten was I allowed to touch what was left. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that Uncle Chibyuk would remember his promise. But the days became weeks, and the weeks became months. Whenever I asked about school, Auntie Clara would snap, "Do you think money grows on trees? You're here to help, not to make trouble." Uncle Chibyuk, who once smiled warmly at me, began to fade from my world. He left early for work, came home late, and rarely spoke to me. When he did, it was a distracted pat on the head or a reminder to listen to your auntie. His promises felt like dreams I could barely remember. At night, I curled up on a thin mat in the corner of the kitchen. The tiles were cold beneath me, and every time I turned, I'd bang my elbow on the stove. I cried quietly, hoping no one would hear. "Papa," I whispered into the darkness. "You said I'd go to school. You said I'd learn." I often dreamed of home. Mama's laughter, the smell of roasted yam, my baby brother's giggles, and Papa lifting me into the air, calling me his little sunshine. I'd wake from those dreams with tears on my cheeks, my heart aching to go back. But I held on to hope. Even as the shouting got louder and the chores piled up, I believed Papa would come for me, or that Uncle Chibyuk would remember his promise. I kept telling myself that God must see me, even if no one else did. Yet, the days grew darker. Auntie Clara found new ways to make me work. If I spilled water or broke a plate, she'd shout, "Amara, you're useless." Sometimes, her hand struck my face before I even finished apologizing. Nathan laughed whenever I cried. "Village girl," he'd sneer. "You should thank us for letting you stay." Refusing wasn't an option. Silence became my shield. I did everything I was told, even when my small hands burned from soap or my knees ached from scrubbing floors. I learned to hide my pain behind quiet obedience. Months went by, and I grew thinner. My dresses were old and torn, my hair rough, my eyes tired. I ate leftovers after everyone else, sometimes just once a day. At night, I curled up on my mat and whispered to the darkness, "Papa, I want to come home." But no one heard me. Then came December, and Uncle Chibyuk announced we were going to the village for Christmas. My heart leapt. Home. I would see Mama and Papa again. Maybe this time, I could tell them everything. When we arrived, people gathered around to admire the shiny car and our fine clothes. To them, we looked like a happy city family. But only I knew the truth. The moment the car stopped in front of our small house, I dashed out, barefoot, heart racing, straight into Mama's arms. I clung to her tightly, sobbing. She held me close, laughing and crying. "My child, why are you crying? You should be happy. You're home." But I couldn't speak. Uncle Chibyuk's warning from the night before echoed in my mind. "When we get to the village, you'll behave. If you say anything bad about my family, you'll regret it when we return." So I said nothing. I smiled when Papa hugged me, though his eyes lingered on my thin arms. "You've grown," he said softly, but I could see confusion, worry behind his smile. During the holiday, I stayed close to Mama, helping her cook, fetch water, and feed my little brother. I laughed with him and played in the sand, my heart aching with every passing day. When I slept beside Mama at night, I prayed silently that morning would never come. But time didn't stop. On the last night, Uncle Chibyuk said we would leave the next day. That evening, I cried harder than ever. I clutched Mama's wrapper and whispered, "Mama, please. I don't want to go back." She frowned gently. "Why, my child? Don't cry. Your uncle is taking good care of you. You're going to school, aren't you?" I nodded weakly. The truth was locked behind my lips. Papa walked in, letting out a heavy sigh. "My daughter," he said gently, "you know we can't give you what he can. Stay strong and learn all you can. You're helping us by being there." I wanted to shout that I wasn't learning anything, that I was just suffering, and all I wanted was to come home. But I couldn't. His eyes sparkled with pride and hope, and I didn't want to break his heart. So, I just cried and held onto his arm until he gently pulled away. The next morning, as the car roared to life, I waved through my tears. Mama and Papa waved back, smiling proudly, completely unaware that I felt like I was being taken away from everything that felt safe. As the road stretched out behind us, Mama softly said to Papa, "She'll thank us one day. She's lucky to be with Chibyuk." But in the back seat, I clutched my doll and stared out the window, thinking, I don't feel lucky. I just want to be home. Years flew by, and my suffering only deepened. By the time I was 11, I had shed my childhood skin. I was now a worker, a little adult in a world that felt way too heavy. I woke up before dawn, the sky still dark, to light the fire and cook breakfast. I was always on the go, cleaning, washing clothes, and taking care of Nathan and the new baby. My hands grew rough and calloused from endless chores. My back ached like I had been carrying the weight of the world, and when I glanced in the mirror, I felt like I was staring at someone twice my age. It was like my childhood was a distant memory, fading away with each passing day. Auntie Clara's voice was a constant echo in my life, sharp and demanding. "Faster, Amara. You lazy girl." Sometimes, her hand would follow her words, leaving me feeling small and defeated. "Uncle Chibyuk?" He said nothing, just reminded me to listen to your auntie, as if I had a choice. School became a forgotten dream, something I barely remembered. The books I once imagined were now just whispers in my prayers, haunting me with what could have been. Then one morning, as I struggled to fetch water, my legs gave way beneath me. The bucket slipped from my hands and crashed to the ground with a loud clang, echoing in my ears. Everything spun around me, and I felt like I was falling into a dark hole. The next thing I knew, I heard neighbors shouting, someone lifting me up, and Uncle Chibyuk's voice, nervous and hurried, saying, "Take her to the clinic." At the clinic, the doctor told me I had a fever and that my body was weak, like a fragile flower wilting in the sun. I remember the cold sting of the needle, the smell of antiseptic, and the quiet hum of machines I didn't understand. As I drifted in and out of sleep, I thought of Papa's voice, steady and kind, saying, "Be strong, my daughter." And I tried. Oh, how I tried. Even with exhaustion weighing me down like a heavy blanket, I clung to the fragile hope that had carried me through the years, the hope that one day someone would finally really see me and understand the struggles I faced every single day. Days passed, but Amara just didn't seem to get any better. It was heartbreaking to see her like this. Her body was rejecting the treatment, her temperature was stubbornly high, and she barely had the strength to even whisper. Dr. Ifioma, a warm-hearted middle-aged woman with a gentle smile, couldn't shake the worry growing inside her. She had seen plenty of kids in distress, but Amara's situation was different. The bruises on her arms, the sheer fear in her eyes, and the way she flinched every time Chibyuk or Clara walked into the room told a story that made Dr. Ifeoma's heart ache. One afternoon, when Clara had stepped out and Chibuk was busy taking a phone call outside, Dr. Ifeoma seized the moment. She knelt beside Amara's bed, her voice low and soothing. "Amara," she said, gently brushing a strand of hair from her forehead, "I need you to be honest with me. Are you safe where you live? Has someone been hurting you?" For a moment, Amara was silent. Her lips quivered, and tears brimmed in her tired eyes. I, I don't want to go back there," she whispered weakly, her voice barely above a breath. "Please, don't tell Uncle." Dr. Ifeoma's heart sank like a stone. She could feel the weight of Amara's fear pressing down on her. Gently, she examined Amara again, noticing the old scars, the healing bruises, and the signs of long neglect that painted a grim picture. But there was something else that made her blood run cold. As she looked closer, her expression shifted from concern to sheer horror. Returning to Amara's bedside, Dr. Ifeoma felt the heaviness in her heart grow. She sat beside her, the soft hum of the hospital fan the only sound in the room. As Amara lay still, her eyes swollen from tears and fever. It was a moment of raw vulnerability, and Dr. Ifeoma knew she had to act. The doctor spoke softly, her tone filled with compassion. "Amara," she said, "I've seen what's happening to you. These marks, they tell a story. But I need to hear it from you, my dear. You can trust me. I'm here to help you, not to hurt you." Later that day, my uncle came to the hospital, smiling like nothing had happened. But this time, Dr. Ifeoma didn't smile back. Her face was firm, her voice calm but strong. "Mr. Chibuk," she said, "I know what's been happening. You won't be seeing Amara again." He froze, pretending to be confused, pretending to care. But the doctor didn't let him speak. "The authorities are already on their way," she said. When the police arrived, everything felt like a dream. They asked questions I couldn't answer. My uncle shouted, saying I was lying, that I was trying to ruin him. But Dr. Ifeoma stood by me the entire time. She didn't let him come near me. As they led him away in handcuffs, my aunt screamed and cried, insisting it was all a mistake. My cousin just stood there, pale and silent. I wanted to feel happy, but instead, I felt empty, like part of me was still trapped somewhere I couldn't escape. That night, I cried quietly into my pillow. The doctor tried to comfort me, but I kept whispering, "He'll come back. He always comes back." Days turned into weeks. The story spread through the city and back to the village. People whispered, some in pity, some in disbelief. When my parents heard, they came as fast as they could. I'll never forget that moment. The door opened, and there was Papa, his eyes red, his face drawn. For a second, I thought I was dreaming. Then he ran to me, knelt by my bed, and pulled me into his arms. "Papa," I cried, "you believe me?" He pressed his forehead against mine. "I do, my child. I believe you. I'm so sorry." His tears fell on my cheek, warm and real. Mama stood behind him, her hands trembling, her lips moving in prayer. "My daughter," she whispered, "God forgive us. We didn't know." Their love filled the room, but so did their pain. I could see the guilt in Papa's eyes, the regret for sending me away, thinking it was for my good. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, but the words just wouldn't come. It felt like there was this huge weight in my chest, you know? I could sense how much he wished he could turn back time, to protect me from everything that had happened. Justice, they said, would take time. But honestly, time only made things worse. My uncle denied everything with a smugness that made my skin crawl. He had money, power, and friends who were more than willing to speak up for him. The police? They said there just wasn't enough proof. They even had the audacity to suggest that the marks on my skin could have been from punishment, not cruelty. Can you believe that? It was infuriating. And just like that, he was free again, walking around like nothing ever happened. When Papa heard the news, it was like I could feel his heart shatter. "Released?" he whispered, his voice barely a breath. "After all he's done?" I could see the disbelief etched on his face, and it broke me all over again. I started crying again, tears streaming down my cheeks. "He'll come back, Papa. I know he will." I felt this deep, gnawing fear that wouldn't let go. Papa held me close, his voice shaking with anger and determination. "No, my child. He will never touch you again. I swear it." His words wrapped around me like a shield, but I still felt so fragile. We went back to the village soon after. The doctor said my body was weak, that the sickness and fear had done too much harm. I could feel the love from my parents, but it was mixed with worry. Papa stayed by my side every night, feeding me little by little, whispering prayers into my hair, his voice soft and soothing. Mama sang me songs I hadn't heard since I was small, her melodies wrapping around me like a warm blanket. Sometimes I smiled for them, but inside, I was so tired. The nights were the hardest. I would wake up shaking, my heart racing, the memories clawing their way back into my mind. Papa would come running, holding me until I stopped trembling. "You're safe now," he'd whisper, his voice steady and calm. "You're home." It was in those moments that I realized, despite everything, I was surrounded by love. But even home couldn't heal everything. My body was giving up, little by little. The doctor from town said my organs were too weak, that I might not recover. I saw the fear in my parents' eyes, but I didn't tell them I already knew. Papa prayed harder. He walked to church barefoot every night, begging God to let me stay. I heard him crying once outside my window. It broke my heart. One cold morning, I opened my eyes and saw both of them sitting by my bed. The light through the window made everything golden. I smiled faintly. "Papa, Mama, I'm tired," I said. Mama shook her head, crying. "No, my child. You'll get better. Just hold on." But I was ready. I looked at them both and whispered, "Tell my baby brother to be good. Tell him I love him." Papa's hand held mine tightly, but I was already slipping away. The room faded. The light grew softer, and for the first time in years, I felt no fear. Only peace. The world grew quiet. Papa called my name again and again, shaking me gently as if his voice could bring me back. Mama fell beside my bed, crying so hard that her voice broke. My little brother tugged at my hand, confused, calling, "Sister, wake up." But I couldn't answer. I was gone. I watched them from a place where pain no longer reached me. I saw Papa's tears fall on my blanket, saw Mama's hands trembling as she clung to me, refusing to let go. I wanted to tell them not to cry, to tell them I wasn't hurting anymore. But my voice belonged to another world now. They buried me beneath the old mango tree behind our house, the same tree where I used to play before I ever left for the city. Its branches still swayed gently in the wind, and when the first handful of earth touched my small coffin, I felt only peace. The village mourned deeply. They whispered my name, their eyes heavy with a mix of pity and anger. It was like the air was thick with unspoken words, you know? Everyone knew what had happened. Everyone knew the truth. But still, no justice came. It felt so unfair. My uncle and his son walked freely in the city, grinning as if they hadn't stolen my childhood, as if their hands were clean and innocent. The law had turned away, like it was blind to the pain they caused. They said there was no evidence. They said the case was closed. But how could they say that? I knew the truth, and so did my father. Every night, without fail, Papa came to sit by my grave with a flickering candle in his hand. I watched him from the soft glow of the flame, his face streaked with tears that seemed to tell a story of their own, his voice low and cracked, filled with heartbreak. "They say there's no evidence," he whispered, "but I see it every time I close my eyes. I see her pain. I see her tears. That's evidence enough for me." His words hung in the air, heavy and poignant, echoing my own thoughts. Sometimes Mama came too. She would kneel beside him, holding his hand, both of them silent beneath the vast expanse of stars. I could almost feel the warmth of their connection, their shared grief binding them together. Her lips would move softly, whispering prayers that seemed to drift up to the heavens, seeking solace. "She's at peace now," she said one night, her voice trembling with the weight of her sorrow. No more pain, no more fear. She was right in a way. I was free from my suffering. But their hearts were still trapped in the storm I had left behind, and it broke my heart to see them like this. The world moved on. People went about their lives, but the wound in my family did not heal. The men who hurt me still lived without shame, untouched, unpunished, like they were above it all. And yet, even from where I was, I could feel my father's vow burning through the night, fierce and unwavering. "Your story won't die with you, Amara," he whispered one evening, the candlelight flickering in his eyes, revealing the determination etched on his face. "The world may forget, but I won't." I wanted to tell him that I knew, that I felt his love even here. The wind carried his words to me, and I let it brush against his cheek, soft as a kiss, a silent promise that I would always be with him in spirit. From beneath the mango tree, I watched the flame of his candle dance in the dark, fragile, yet unbroken. Just like his love, just like my memory. It was a bittersweet reminder that even in death, I could still feel the warmth of their love, a love that would never fade away.